Since 1934, Iowa's farmers have turned to the Iowa Farm Bureau spokesman as their trusted news source. Now, the Spokesman Speaks. Listen in and hear from leading experts on topics important to farmers and agriculture. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to this special three-part series of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Caitlin Lamb, and this week we're celebrating the accomplishments of our farming members during Iowa Farm Bureau's annual meeting in Des Moines. That includes the three winners of our 2023 Young Farmer Leadership Award, Josh Bierbaum of Cass County, Matthew Burt of Marshall County, and Ryan Gibbs of Delaware County. During this three-part podcast series, you will hear more about each award winner's passion for farming and what it means to them to be leaders in an ag community. If you're not already, subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks in your favorite podcast app and watch for new episodes of this mini-series, which will release tomorrow and Wednesday. Okay, let's head out to Cass County to hear from Josh Bierbaum, a farmer who enjoys connecting with people about agriculture, from his local community to our nation's capital. We're out here on Josh Bierbaum's farm in Cass County. Can you just start us off by telling us where we're standing right now?
Yep, so this is my family farm that I grew up on with my brother and my sister as well. We're just right outside of Griswold. It's a family heritage farm, 150 years with the Bierbaum family.
And Josh, you told me you recently came back to the farm. Can you talk about how that happened and why it was so important for you to come back to this family farm legacy?
Yep. In April of 2022, I had the opportunity to come back to the farm full time to be with my brother and dad, and all three of us farm. We grow corn and soybeans. I've always wanted to farm since I was a little boy. Dad always had us in the tractor. He's been farming since I was grown up, and of course my grandpa farmed before him, so he grew up around the farm as well. So you could say it runs in our blood. When you're a little boy running around the farm, you want to be a farmer. That's always been an aspiration of mine. So after high school here at Griswold, I attended Northwest Missouri State University in Maryville, majoring in ag science. I had several ag internships throughout college where I learned a lot, and then I was able to take my first job at that time traveling the Midwest. I worked for what was then Monsanto with a contracting company called Agritech Research, traveling the Midwest. Through that time, I learned a lot, and I knew I always wanted to come back and farm and take what I learned and come back here. I've always wanted to be back to the farm, and it wasn't the right time to come back when I came out of college. I just couldn't make financial ends meet at that time. And about a year ago, in April 2022, we were able to expand our farming operation, and it fit that time for me to step aside from employment to come work at the farm.
That's great. I'm so glad that you were able to make that work, because when you talk about being a little boy living on the farm, it's your dream to become a farmer. And that's certainly something that we see on our family farm with our 5-year-old. Yep. That's what he talks about. He wants to farm, and work at the co-op and work on tractors. So anything that has to do with agriculture, yep, he's right there.
Big farm machinery, that catches a little boy's eye. I was there too.
Absolutely. And now you get to drive it.
Yep.
That's even better. And one thing that really stood out to me in the letter of recommendation that your president wrote for you to be named the Young Farmer Leadership Award winner is Josh cares about the future of agriculture and wants to make a positive impact, not just on his family farm, but on our community and state. And I could tell from the list of things that you're involved in how true that is. Let's talk first about your community and what it means to be living back here in Griswold.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Griswold's a small community. And, I've been here my whole life outside of when I went to college. I went to school here. I have friends and family that are here. You want to be an active member of that. And when I was growing up, the community helped through sports and activities and church and 4-H. So when you grow up, you just think about how much the community gave back to you. So you want to be a part of that for the younger generation, to keep generations coming back to rural Iowa, to rural America. And yeah, I'd love to give back to the community. I think it's a very important part of what I was raised to be through my family. And with my wife, Logan, and I, we love to lend a helping hand whenever asked.
I love what you say when you talk about wanting to make this a place where people feel like they can come back. I even listened one time at our annual meeting. We had someone who talked about basically rural vitality and what can we do to attract people to come back. And one thing that their high school did was at graduation, they gave every senior a mailbox with their name on it, with the hopes that later they would put that mailbox back into the community because they'd be living there. And in coming back, it sounds like you have gotten involved in a lot of different things, especially things that do positively impact youth who may be interested in agriculture.
So I am actually a part of the Griswold Ag Boosters Association. It helps assist the Griswold FFA chapter in any activities that they may have. We help them with what they may need at the county fair, activities they have throughout the year. They recently hosted the district soil judging competition here locally and needed volunteers through that. Our county board helped with that. We've also helped them with their test plot that they recently started a couple years ago. And of course, the FFA chapter doesn't have equipment. It's not feasible for an FFA chapter or school to own equipment. So they look to local farmers to help support them. And I know several of us in the community, farmers that just donate time, equipment to help them. It's not much. It's 5 acres. And, we're happy to lend a helping hand, let them see how a planter works, how to plant corn, how to check the depth of corn, how to check the emergence of the corn, soybeans, whichever crop they might be planting, and, just be actively involved in that.
And then as part of this award, you are given money to grant to a local organization or cause of your choice. And that kind of ties in with what we just talked about in youth mentorship. Can you talk about who you decided to give that to?
Yep. So my wife, Logan, and I, we spent a lot of time talking about where we wanted to donate the money. Specifically, we both grew up not knowing each other, but a couple counties away in 4-H. We both did it through our youth clerk through high school. So we decided to donate to the Cass County 4-H Vision Endowment. We thought it was very important to both of us, being former 4-H members. My wife actually worked for Extension at one time, being a county youth coordinator for Fremont County. So 4-H is very near and dear to our hearts right now. And we thought, what's better opportunity than to give back to current 4-H members and future 4-H members. Through that endowment, that money goes towards sponsoring day camps for 4-Hers, any trips they may want to take or have the opportunity to take and sign up for, and then it also can cover future membership fees that 4-H has for the members.
I know that I've seen the positive impact that 4-H has had on youth in my community, and you never want that membership fee to be the barrier to getting that experience. So I think that's really great that that's where you and Logan landed on.
Yep.
And I want to go back to something that you had just talked about too with the test plot with the FFA students. But in talking to you, it sounds like you do a lot of test plots and trials just on your own farm.
We've got several test plots through the years. Iowa State University has done some nitrogen trials. We've done a lot of soybean trials with the Iowa Soybean Association for the gall midge. A soybean gall midge showed up on our farm a couple years ago, and it devastated a couple of our fields. It's a very small insect that can fly in. It will affect the soybean plant at an early stage, about V2, V3. Once it's infected, it struggles throughout its whole life, almost killing the plant. So a couple years ago, Iowa State University was able to do some research on our farm to better understand the effects of that insect. The Soybean Association also followed along and doing different varieties to understand how to better control it.
That's awesome that you open up. Well, let me back up. It's not awesome that you had gall midge. It's awesome that you do open up your farm, though, because we do hear more and more about these pests or diseases that we haven't typically had to deal with. I was at a staff meeting where someone was talking about writing about jumping worms. And of course, that sounds like terrifying. Like, what's next? Flying spiders. So it's really great that you're able to partner with all of these entities to figure out first, how can we combat this on our farm, and then also help prevent the damage that someone else may experience as well.
Yep. And through the Soybean Association, too, we do water quality testing out of our tile drainage and ditches. We send off samples of the water that's running off for nitrate levels, phosphorus levels, just making sure that we're not losing that or preventing as much as possible keeping it on our farm. And the results have shown that through our no-till practices and cover crops that we've been working very well to keep the runoff low.
Ahead of this interview, you told me like, oh, I don't want to toot my own horn, but we'd see really good results. I told you like, absolutely, toot your horn about that. That's incredible.
Yep.
And even behind you right here, I can see grass waterways. And you said you had some cover crops, which you just terminated, and terraces. So conservation is definitely a part of your family farm legacy. Who kind of started that? Was it grandpa, dad?
I believe it was either in the late 80s or early 90s. I cannot remember, to tell you the truth. They started no-till. They had been tilling the farm, and Dad came out of college, was not very happy with what he was seeing, and research was starting to emerge at that time about no-till conservation practices. So they started implementing that across several different pieces of the family farm. And recently, in probably the late 90s, early 2000s, we went complete no-till. We've been that way ever since. And we've seen very good results with it, I would say, for this area of the state. It makes my heart drop when I see heavy rains and you see soil erosion. It's not what we as farmers want, I don't believe, and it's certainly not what we want on our family farm for sure. We implemented cover crops about 6-7 years ago, probably. It more started with the city of Griswold and their water quality issues that they had with nitrates in their city wells. We have a farm that's in their capture zone, so we were able to work with them to try to control nitrate levels in the city water. And then we've always had headlands and terraces and waterways throughout the farms that have needed them. Several years ago, we also applied cover crops and buffer strips along creeks.
And obviously through conservation, that's another way that you're showing that you care about your local community, but also the state as a whole. So you serve currently as Farm Bureau
Vice President.
Yep. Okay. What types of other things have you been involved in with Farm Bureau?
Yep. So in 2018, I was part of the Ag Leaders Institute. Met several great people across the state of Iowa. Still friends with them today. You just constantly follow them on Facebook, keep up to date. You go to any Farm Bureau event and you just recognize faces from all over the state. I was also part of the membership chair for, I believe, 2019 and 2020 for Cass County. And we hit membership goal both years relatively well. And just keeping membership up throughout the county. As you know, we're aging community. You know, you always want young people involved. I joined Farm Bureau in 2016. So in 2018, I was encouraged to apply for Ag Leaders. I got in, and I've been a county vice president since 2019.
You started, so 2016, it feels like it wasn't that long ago, but then you've quickly found yourselves in these different leadership roles. And part of the leadership position that I've seen you take too is on policy. So through Ag Leaders going to DC, but then there's also things that you have decided to do through Farm Bureau, but like on your own.
So in 2018, I went on the policy trip with Ag Leaders to Washington, D.C. We visited with Congressman at that time and Senator Ernst and Senator Grassley, visiting about issues. Back then, it was, I believe, the trade war was a big problem with China. This past spring in March of 2022, I was able to go on the policy trip again to represent Cass County to Washington, D.C., and we visited with congressmen and the senators as well, talking specifically about the upcoming Farm Bill and Waters of the U.S. and the Supreme Court case going before that. And then recently I visited with Senator Grassley on one of his 99 county tours. It's just really important to represent Farm Bureau's image, and more specifically, my own image of the family farm. You know, just get your voice out there. Let them know what the issues are that are affecting you day to day. Because if we don't tell our story, someone else will. And it's just important to speak openly and honest with them about what you're seeing and how it might affect you.
Yeah, as someone who works in public relations, it's like music to my ears to hear you say, we need to get out there and tell our story before someone else does. And I chuckle too because your wife Logan said, oh, anytime he can get out to DC, he's going. So I can tell that is important to you. Is there a specific policy that you think young farmers specifically should be paying attention to?
The Farm Bill is always important. Conservation practices are important. We've talked about that here on my family farm. And these conservation funding and programs are always wrote into the Farm Bill. So, we always talk about how important it is to get signed up, understand what's available through the county offices, and how we can implement that here on our family farm.
And through Farm Bureau having these leadership experiences, having these policy discussions, and you were talking about being membership chair and trying to get younger people into Farm Bureau and to pay attention to these things that will impact their family farms. Why do you think it's so important, especially now, that young farmers do get more involved in these discussions, or even more generally, just involved in their community?
It's really important, I think. My wife, Logan, and I talk about this constantly, to be visible in the community. You want to be in front of people. Don't hide what you're doing, not that you're doing anything wrong. Just openly talk about what's happening on your family farm, what you're doing. I wrote a letter to the editor when I was in Ag Leaders for the Des Moines Register talking about conservation practices on our farm. And I believe the last sentence I wrote might have been, ask any farmer what conservation practices they are implementing or willing to implement. And I truthfully think that's a very important stance to have. You want to be open and honest about everything that's happening. And I love to show off what we've done on our family farm to people and anyone that wants to come see it.
I think sometimes to people who are outside of agriculture, they're interested, but they don't always feel like they know how to ask the right questions. So again, when you talk about that visibility, just knowing, oh, hey, there's Josh and he's a farmer. I just read something maybe in the Des Moines Register, and I'd really love to ask him about that. I mean, I'm sure just being involved gets you to these conversations that do help people have more trust in the farming community.
Yeah, and a lot of these conversations are even with my wife. She'll ask a question here or there and say, well, why do you do this? Or why haven't we done that on our family farm? Tell me more about why you're planting cover crops, or why we're leaving a waterway in the middle of the field, or why the terrace goes here and why is there a terrace there. And she'll chuckle and laugh at me when I say that, but we have open conversations about that when she's riding with me in the tractor in the spring and fall, and we're having family members or community members step onto the farm just asking those questions.
I admire Josh's commitment to wanting to better his community and understanding agriculture, conservation, and leadership play a role in that commitment. That's it for today's episode. Remember to tune in tomorrow and on Wednesday to hear from our two other Young Farmer Leadership Award winners, Matthew Burt and Ryan Gibbs. And thank you for listening to The Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to The Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.